Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining for today's ATA program. Today, we're going to be discussing for this CLC, it'll be about geology. I'm here with Ms. Dr. Emily Beverly. And I'll be today's moderator for this event. We'll be diving into a great conversation, and before we get started, I want to just cover some housekeeping. And this is an opportunity for you to engage and ask our guests many questions. And if you happen to not catch some questions, you can always view back at the recording that we have after this session. And without further ado, I'm just going to bring out some icebreaker questions. What was your favorite major whenever you were going for your undergrads or your master's program or any program?
What was my favorite major?
Favorite course.
Oh, my
Okay.
favorite course. I took I can't remember the specific name of it, but I took a archaeology class from an archaeologist that was doing underwater archaeology. So she would like scuba dive to go. So we had a whole class about underwater archaeology. It's kind of random.
Anything ocean related, anything ocean or space related, I get such a fear with that because that's like the unknown, and I don't like not knowing things and people going out there and be like, yeah, check this out. We discovered this new animal. And I'm like, what? But
Yeah, I don't know how to scuba dive, but the class was cool.
if you could have any other profession other than the one that you have now, what would it be and why?
Probably some kind of photographer.
Okay.
Because I would, part of the reason I like my job is I get to travel a lot and see a lot of interesting things, and I think that would be another way to do the kind of same thing. And I like taking pictures, so
Yeah.
Instagram's the only social media I use. But don't do Twitter or anything, so
Instagram is a really nice sort of like photography. Even the filters have like upgraded since when the app first came out.
yeah.
Are you a DSLR person or a mirrorless person?
Oh, I have a mirrorless now that I bought for my lab, but I haven't had all that much time to
Really?
use it, but it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
We use it to take big panoramas
Okay.
of rocks in the field. So
That's-
we can take a picture of the whole canyon with the camera. So
And is it usually just one full shot? For example, like how many gigs would it take for the whole pattern? Depending on what the size of what you did.
yeah, it would depend on the size of it and how many pictures we took. But yeah, you take a bunch and you can stitch them together in
Okay.
Photoshop.
Oh, okay.
What I know how to use. There's other software out there.
I think Photoshop is a really good software program, especially when it comes down to like connecting photos to make it look blending, all that stuff. If you don't mind, could you share some of your educational background, who you are and what inspired you to go towards this journey, towards your career in geology?
Sure. So I did not know what I wanted to do when I went to undergrad. So I went to a small liberal arts school in San Antonio called Trinity University.
Okay.
And I was undeclared, and I had a variety of different majors that I wandered around in. Ended up in anthropology for a while, which makes sense because I do a lot of archaeology kind of related work now.
Yeah.
So I always had that interest. But I ended up taking a geology class because I needed a science credit. And so as a junior, I switched my major to geology. And so finished up my degree in geology. And then I took a year off and worked. And then I went and did my master's at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And then came back to Texas to do a PhD at Baylor. So, and then after that, I did what's called a postdoctoral fellowship, which is basically kind of a step in between being a graduate student and being a professor. So it's an opportunity to build a lot of research experience, and that's really what I was interested in doing, was research.
Okay.
So I did 2 different ones of those, and one was really short at Georgia State in Atlanta. And then I did another 2-year-long one at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And then moved here to start my job at University of Houston.
Okay, all right. Out of the two researches, which one was like more, I would say, intricate or more interesting?
Well, the one at Georgia State was kind of like somebody had some money, and so I needed a job.
Yeah.
Whereas the one at Michigan was a scientific problem that I was really interested in.
Okay.
So I liked that one a lot better. The other one was kind of like, I need a job now, and the one at Michigan, I helped design the project, and so, you know, in addition to being this middle kind of step, you have a lot more freedom to do your own, come up with your own projects, and so that's what made it a lot more fun. Plus,
Okay.
Ann Arbor's a fun town to live in.
That's the first time I've ever heard of it. so.
It's like west of Detroit.
Oh, okay.
It's like a college town, kind of like Waco in Texas,
Yeah.
or College Station, but it's not quite as big as College Station. So
Yeah. So for me, for my, experiences, I don't know anything about geology. All I know is that when I used to watch movies and they'd always like talk about rocks and like the earth. So that's my knowledge on geology. I want to know.
most of that is wrong. Most movies are wrong.
Yeah.
With geology.
So my question for you is, what does a day in the office look like?
So when I'm in the office, I usually have meetings with my students. So I have several graduate students, or I'll have meetings with students who are in my classes. And then I also will, sometimes I get to do a little bit of lab work. So training students on how to do things, or we're meeting to talk about some of the results of the data that we've been collecting.
Okay.
So that's what I do a lot in the field. I mean, in the office is mainly helping out my students at this point. And sometimes I get to work in the lab. I miss it.
Yeah.
So
What type of tools do you guys usually do in like labs? Is there like specific ones? I know you had mentioned that you would use cameras to take photography of what you guys would take. Like, is there any like specific hardware, like tools?
yeah, so a lot of my work is looking at the chemistry of these rocks, and we're looking at it in different ways. Sometimes we're just looking at how much magnesium or how much aluminum or how much calcium there is in the rocks, and there's different ways we can measure that, and sometimes that requires a lot of prep work. So that gives undergraduates working in the lab a lot of experience learning how to prep things, and then sometimes they get to analyze the data. And then other ways are actually looking at isotopes. So I'm specifically interested in isotopes of carbon and oxygen, and those isotopes that get preserved in a specific mineral, and that's preserved in a lot of different rocks, is called calcium carbonate. Which, if you've ever been to Central Texas, it's the rock you see everywhere. That rock preserves this calcium, or preserves the carbon and the oxygen, and the carbon tells us a lot about what vegetation was there when the rock was being formed, and the oxygen can tell us a lot about the water cycle when that rock was being formed. So it's those two isotopes are very useful. And then there's also a way we can use the combination of the two to understand temperature. So we can reconstruct things about what plants were there and what the height, the water cycle was like, as well as temperature. That gives us kind of a picture of what the climate and the environment was like in the past.
Okay, all right. So geology, is it like a broad thing to like mention? Because anybody could say I studied geology, but what is there like specialties within geology?
Yeah, so actually we more frequently use the term earth science
Okay.
now because it's more includes kind of a lot more things. So earth science is kind of the usual term, like that's what at the main campus, that's what our department is called, as earth and atmospheric science. So we're actually even more broad than that. So that can include there are people that focus on the 3 different rock types, so igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary rocks. There are people that focus on how rocks move as they, as the plates are moving around the surface of the earth. There are people that study how water moves through rocks. There are people that study pollution. So, I'm trying to think. Petroleum geology is a big one in this area. So pretty much anything that has to do with a rock, you can find somebody doing that in earth science. Like construction is relevant to soils are kind of in that field. So it's a very, very broad, and it includes aspects of physics and chemistry and math. Right, so we're a very interdisciplinary kind of field.
Okay. Do y'all work with a lot of chemicals as well? Like with say for example, like will y'all put something on the rocks?
It kind of depends. A lot of times things we need to do, they need a lot of chemical treatments, like we'll do things to kind of remove things that we don't want to look at, or to kind of break down the rock or dissolve the rock so that we can analyze it in some other way. So yeah, some of the labs in our department look like a chemistry lab. Okay. So there's fume hoods and things like that. So it just depends. So some earth scientists are, labs, and they look like chemistry labs. Some are completely computer based, and they're, maybe they work with earthquakes, and that's all just data that they're interpreting on a computer. So they might have a computer lab. Or there's other people in our department that work on remote sensing. Okay. And so they use data from satellites to and so they have their own computer lab, and will interpret things about the earth from space. Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, because those satellites can pretty much capture anything nowadays. Yeah, that's a very rapid, if you're interested in that, that's a very rapidly growing field, is using all of this data that we're generating from satellites. And also just ArcGIS, which is a program that we use a lot. Getting a certificate in that makes you very hireable as well, because it opens basically any company that needs somebody to make a map. Okay. Could hire you. So, people that are like politicians need map makers, cities need map makers. Like there's lots and lots of people that need people that have expertise in kind of map making, and that's included in geology as well. Okay, that actually follows up to my next question, is that what are some skills juniors and seniors in college can develop now as they're preparing for a career in geology? Well, I think it depends on the specialty. Your specialty and what you're interested in, and whether you're interested in working straight out of undergrad, or getting a lot of geology jobs require either experience or a master's. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of depends on whether you're trying to get a job right away, or you want to go ahead and get this extra experience that will allow you to go on and eventually make more money.
Okay.
And get some of these jobs that are higher paid. But which may seem scary to a lot of people, because why do I want to pay for more school?
Right.
Well, the good thing in geology is that most degrees are paid for,
Okay.
or at least partially paid for. So if you want to get a master's in geology, many universities will have these degrees funded. So you can be either a research assistant or a teaching assistant, and it covers your, you get a stipend, which depends on how much it is, depending on where the school is. And then you also get tuition remission, and you would get health insurance.
Gonna make you change my major right now.
So, I mean, the stipend is nothing big,
Yeah.
but it's enough to live on usually.
Okay.
And so that's something to think about, and that I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of, that don't have family that went to grad school, is that in the sciences, a lot of them are paid for.
Okay.
Unlike, law school or medical school,
Yeah.
you have to take out loans. Well, with geology or science, most of the time, you can get that paid for, or at least, a good portion of it paid for.
Okay. Did you have to go through towards an internship, or did you just have to go to like a normal application, like if you're filling out a job portion?
So the school, what you would do is that first you have to decide what kind of geology you're interested in, and then you would contact professors at that university. So if you were interested in the kind of research I do, you'd look me up, find out you like my research, then you'd send me an email, and then I would email back if I had spots open. So
Okay.
not all professors will have spots open, but if they do, then you would usually send them your resume, and you would have usually, if they live in Houston, I might be with them in person, but most of the time they're on Zoom. And so then you'd have a meeting, and maybe you have a couple meetings and talk about, see how your personalities kind of fit, because it's like a 2-year commitment, or a PhD, it's like 4 to 5 year commitment. So you have to make sure that your kind of personalities jive.
Yeah.
But as well as that you're actually interested in what they're doing, and then you would apply. And so those applications are on, you go to any earth science. So, UH has geology, A&M, UT, Baylor, SMU, they all have geology departments, and those, you would just go to their website, and there would be a section for graduate students, and you can find the applications there.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So in other words, just be real close to your professor. If you want an internship or a job opportunity.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's also another way how people find somebody that they're interested in working with, is that you could talk to your professors that you have now and ask, oh, do you know anyone that works in remote sensing?
Yeah.
And they might say, oh yeah, there's Dr. Khan at UH Maine campus. He does a lot of remote sensing, you should talk to him. So definitely ask your professors if that's something you're interested in. Ask them if they can point you in the direction of somebody that they know personally, that would be interested in that kind of research.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. I know one of my professors had told me the best way to get any connection of any sort is to always talk to your professor, because they're pretty much the first, in command to pretty much knowing who you need to go to or what you need to do to go into a certain career path. But I'm gonna go ahead and ask Miss Erica if we have any online questions. Miss Erica, do we have any online questions by any chance?
Sorry, I was muted. Don't see any questions for now.
Okay, all right. We'll just carry on.
Thank you.
So, could you describe the 3 things that have been most important to you in choosing your career in geology?
3 things. like why I chose geology, is that what you're asking?
What stood out to you as into like go forth? Because you had mentioned that you said freshman and sophomore, and then you declared on junior year that you wanted to go.
Oh, yeah, so the reason I like geology and earth sciences, I've always been very into outdoorsy kind of things, so I like to go hiking, I like the field work, I like the camping. If you don't like those things, that doesn't mean that geology is a bad fit for you. You will have to go to field camp, which everybody has to go through. It's like a 5-week course that
wow.
everybody has to suffer through. But if you can suffer through that, then you can, there's all different types of geology that don't, like, you can be a lab scientist, you can be a, work on, mainly on the computers, making maps or remote sensing, like I said, or geophysics. So you don't have to be a field scientist, but that's what drew me to it. I really like being in the outdoors and getting to travel and go interesting places and meet new people. The other thing I really like about earth science is that sometimes I'm the first person that's ever tried to figure out what this rock is.
Oh, that's pretty
So,
cool. Like a discovery type of
yeah, so like, where I worked for my PhD in Africa, I worked in Western Kenya, and nobody had looked at those rocks since the 1980s. And before that, it was 1910.
Okay.
So, that was really cool to me because I'm making new discoveries.
Yeah.
You really can feel like you're contributing something new, which I found to be a fun experience. So, if you have a lot of curiosity, that's a fun thing for you. And the third thing that I like is that it is very interdisciplinary. And so that was part of my problem in undergrad, is that I didn't really like any one thing. So I didn't just like, chemistry, and I didn't just like physics, didn't just like anthropology. And what I realized is that earth science kind of incorporates all of those things. So I liked how interdisciplinary it was, and that, they're trying to solve these problems from a lot of different directions.
Yeah, that sounds very, very diverse in the sense of it's just not one thing that you do. Sounds really cool. Like you're starting to convince me to change my major, because I like doing the outdoors, like going out, but I just haven't gone hiking. I've always wanted to go hiking, but it's just the fact that I had a manager of mine who would always talk about going hiking, and he'd be like, "You gotta take these certain pants, these boots," and I'm like, I can't even afford like the shoes that are on right now on the retail, like they're like 100 or something. And he was showing me some $200 pair of hiking boots. I'm like, what do you spend your money on?
Yeah, no, that is a problem. All the gear you need. But I would say what I've done, and when I started out, I didn't try to buy all of it at once, right? Like you slowly build up.
Okay.
You look for sales. So like one of my favorite stores is REI.
Oh my God, I love REI.
And they have really good sales. So you can get stuff on sale. So that would be my recommendation, although it is really expensive, I know, and that's why the undergrads that I have working with me that go out in the field, there are some things I won't let them borrow. Like I don't share sleeping bags, so you have to buy your own sleeping bag. But I do share, like I have extra camping pads, and I have extra tents and extra backpacks. Don't have extra shoes. That's kind of an additional thing.
Yeah.
But I have all this gear that I let them borrow, because I do know that it's very expensive. And so, then if they decide they want to go on with this, they would eventually have to buy some of this stuff on their own.
Right,
But if they're just interested in getting some field experience one time, then, they can borrow a lot of it from me.
Okay.
So we realize that, and we try to try to minimize how much you have to buy, but there are just some things, I feel like that's with any kind of field. If you're a construction worker, you have to buy steel-toed boots, hard hats. So I think that there are some things you just have to find the money, which I know is hard.
I went initially whenever I was starting my criminal justice major, I wanted to become a cop, and they were telling me like they'll only give you like the weapon and then the belt. Other than that, you have to get everything else. And I'm like, what? And then they're like, you got to go to this location. It's partnered with Houston Police Department. I was like, okay. You get a 10% off. I'm like, that does not help. Handcuffs are like $50 to $60. I'm like, what the heck? But that really does sound interesting. For the boot camp, I'm sorry, the field experience, field training that you mentioned, what's the criteria to pass that?
So the field camp is a class that's held in it starts kind of the beginning of June. So most big universities have this. So it starts in the beginning of June for UH, and it goes to like beginning of July. So sometime around like 4th of July usually. And so what you're graded on is you go out and you're taught how to measure different things. So sometimes it might be learning how to measure things kind of vertically, like going up a cliff, like a rock face. I mean, like not climbing straight up the rock face, but like that's what I'm trying to get you to imagine. It's like a big rock face. And so you would like kind of hike up the side and measure as you go. And then, or you might be mapping and learning how to map an area. So learning how to kind of show on the lines on the map, like there's this type of rock here and there's this type of rock here. And how do I figure out how far apart those are and things like that. So that's a lot of what that experience is about. Mostly at UH, I think they're living in kind of cabins with bunks in them. But there is a little bit of camping as well too. So
I've never camped in my life though. I feel like doing that for me, I'd get afraid of camping and sleeping outside out in the
well, so you get kind of a introduction to how to camp. We have a shorter field course that's held over spring break that all the students are required to go on as part of a different course. And so that's just a week, and it's held in Big Bend National Park in West Texas. And so that's you get kind of an introduction and learn how to set up the tent and do all that kind of stuff.
That is so cool.
So there's you're not just hung out to dry.
Like survive.
We spend a lot of time making sure that you know what gear you need, and they go to Montana, so it's cold. So a lot of people don't necessarily know that it might snow in the summer in Montana.
That is so cool. I think the only time I saw snow was when it snowed over here one time. And I was like, oh my God, it's snowing.
In the winter storm.
But camping in the cold in the summer, that's something to talk about. It's wild. No, I think you had mentioned the store REI. Like I went there one time and like I was so happy because I think the only camping gear I would call it is I got this carabiner. And I felt super cool, and I was like, I could climb rocks and I could climb down cliffs and all that stuff.
Well,
but it says not intended for climbing, so.
Oh, well, you don't have to be a rock climber. I actually hate rock climbing, so it scares me. I don't enjoy it. There are things I won't climb up. So you don't have to be a rock climber to be a geologist.
Yeah, that was actually another question I was gonna ask you. Like, what are some strengths and skills that are needed to whenever you're trying to pursue this career? Because being outdoorsy, I think it would be considered a skill, because not many people can go out there and like you had mentioned, camp. It's sort of like a different lifestyle.
Well, I mean, and that's not something that everybody needs to be a geologist. Knowing how to work in the field and measure things in the field, that's a skill that a lot of geologists need, but not everybody needs to do this kind of like remote work and,
Yeah.
and camping and things like that, you know. There's tons of jobs that are you don't have to do that kind of thing. But learning how to measure things and interpret things, that is a valuable skill.
Right.
I think getting some sort of remote sensing experience also is a really valuable skill. I've talked about that already, like this program ArcGIS, if you can get some classwork in that, that's another good thing. I think anything with any kind of programming experience is also really good. Because a lot of things are moving, even in like most fields, like geology is as well as moving towards like big data, machine learning. So all kind of branches of geology are finding ways to use machine learning. So if you have any experience in that area or can get any experience in that area, I think that would be very, very valuable. At UH, what I always tell students is that they should try to get some experience working with a professor. Not all professors work with undergraduate students, but a lot of them have, you know, small projects that they need help on. So in my lab, I have two undergrads, pretty much always have two undergrads at a time working, crushing rocks or drilling rocks to like get a subsample, or so they measure the size of the particles with this an instrument that measures it using a laser. What else? We do isotopes on water, so we do look at the isotopes of oxygen and hydrogen in the water molecule. So there's a variety of different things, and so like most of the professors have research that they're doing, and they might have some lab work that you could help with, and that looks really good on a resume when you're applying for jobs or applying for grad school. So I always encourage people to do that, and the way to do that is just to talk to your professors. Like either go to their office or email them. And if they don't know you, like send them your resume so that they have something to kind of like look at. It makes you look more professional if you already have your resume made. Even if you've done nothing related to geology, like even if you work at like Walmart or if you're a dog sitter, like that, you know, that's fine. Just put it on, you know, when I was first starting, like I worked in a feed store, and that was like one of my first jobs, and I had that on my resume, and then now I don't put that in on there anymore. Like it's only relevant stuff I put on, but in the beginning, like any sort of work experience is good. So that's what I tell students, and you know, not every professor will have anything for you to do, so just try multiple. Send a couple emails and see what comes back, because you know, like me, people keep asking me, and I already have 2 students. I don't really need any more right now, but you know, you can keep asking. You know, I basically hire anybody after their freshman year, so I want them to have a couple geology classes. So as soon as you're like a sophomore, because you've had like, you know, intro geology and maybe one other geology class, then you know, a lot of people would be interested in hiring you. So
let me take some 2 geology classes soon. No, you make a good point about, you know, having a relationship with your professors. I know whenever I was taking my senior seminar class, I know she was also explaining to us how, you know, popping up to your, you know, professor's office space, or even just to hang out with them, builds a good rapport with them. So that way, if you know, you ever need a letter of recommendation or something like that, they'll be willing to write you one, rather than just, you know, asking, you know, your professor that you took one class and they don't know anything about you.
yeah,
So I think it's very important as well.
Yeah, because the better we know you and like the easier it is to talk about like specific examples of how you did something that was good in our class. And so the better we know you, the easier that is. Also, if you've had some sort of something happen in your life, like if your professor knows, they can also kind of explain that. Like I've had students that, had a major life event and failed out and then came back and then made all A's, so like, even though, but their GPA was not that great because they, they had a really good reason. And so if your professor knows all of that, they can kind of put it into context for you when you're writing like a letter of recommendation for things. So, talking to your professors is always a good thing. There are professors that are not real friendly, but my office, I'm pretty open. So as long as I don't, if it's not like, usually I'll talk to anybody as long as it's not like 15 minutes before I have to teach. Then I'm like, I gotta go, I gotta think about what I'm gonna talk about in 15 minutes.
You've distracted me.
Yeah, so that's about the only time I turn people away is when I'm like, I can't think about this right now. I gotta focus on, what I'm about to talk about for 45 minutes or an hour. So,
Yeah, you could definitely get like sidetracked or even just go on autopilot and just be like, what are we talking about here?
yeah, so.
My next question is, how do you manage to have like a work-life balance? Besides, how do you separate from work, your professional career and your personal life?
Well, I would say it's always a work in progress. I generally don't check my email, like I don't respond to emails like on the weekend. And I do my best to not respond after a certain time at night, to try to put some boundaries. I also have set it up on my phone so it doesn't notify me when I get emails, so that I don't think about it all the time, to try to do some work-life balance. I guess that's one of the major things for me, was a turning point for me, was like turning off the mail notifications. I mean, I can still check it if I want to,
Yeah.
but I don't get notifications.
Have the sound on, you get like PTSD and like,
Yeah, so it doesn't even like show me that I have new mail. So it just has like the little mail icon. It doesn't even tell me how many there are. So I did things like that to kind of differentiate. And then even if I'm really busy, I always make sure to take a day off, because I have I often during the semester have to work on Sundays to get ready for the week. Like in the afternoon, I'll have to do a little bit of work. But I always take Saturday off. Because I found that I need that downtime to kind of clear my head. And if I don't take it, I'm just a mess. And so I always make sure to try to take that and make sure I get a long walk in with my dog, so that I kind of clear my head. And ideally I would take both days off, but sometimes that just doesn't happen. Professors, I think students a lot of times think of it only from their side, where you have all these things due. Well, we have to make all of those things and then grade them. So
we see one, but you guys see like many of them.
yeah. So I know it's very stressful for finals on y'all, but it's also stressful on us, because we have all of you, we have to then grade all of your assignments. So we're very busy this time of year as well. So it's stressful on everyone. But that's kind of what I try to do, is make sure I get some downtime at least once a week, and go for a walk with my dog, get some exercise.
Any hobbies?
Hobbies. well, it's, maybe nerdy or like old lady, but I picked up knitting during COVID. So my brother is having a baby in next month. And so I've been knitting a baby blanket, and I find that very relaxing. Because it's like you're just like constantly doing something with your hands. So I find that very relaxing. Do a lot of yoga.
One of our peer mentors, our fellow peer mentor, he's a yoga instructor for that school. So he's
Oh, nice.
always wants us to go to the yoga class. And like I can't even like stretch without hurting myself. And like,
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to find your yoga class. It's like on your level. So I'm not like a handstand kind of person. I don't do anything like that. So
I could do like the lean to side. And, like, what's that tree pose? I can only do that for 3 seconds. But it's always a good thing to pick up some hobbies, especially like you had said, taking a day off and like letting your mind go blank and like just not even think about work is always a healthy thing, especially like with nowadays everything's feels like everybody's coming back from what they're doing, especially for after COVID.
yeah, this is the first semester for me that's felt pretty much normal.
Mhm.
I think last spring semester was still kind of weird. But this semester has finally felt pretty normal. Haven't had hardly anybody out with COVID.
That's
So there's just a few. And people seem much more engaged and ready to learn again, as opposed to last spring. I think everybody was still pretty tired and burnout. So
what type of dog do you have, if you don't mind me asking?
oh, my dog is like a blue heeler mix. She's like spotted, about the size of a lab. She's like 60 pounds. She's pretty old now, but she's still pretty active for an 11-year-old dog. So
My dog's turning 10 next year, so he's a little poodle.
oh, okay.
Toy poodle. I call him, his name is George, but because he looks like George Washington.
Oh,
Because he has a little like wig almost looking like, so I was like, yeah, he looks like he's a George.
yeah.
I'm gonna see if we have any questions online. And then, Erica, do we have anybody in the online chat if anybody has questions?
Not so far yet, but I do have a question myself. I was wondering, what programming languages do geologists use? I was curious about that.
So the common ones are Python and MATLAB. I personally use R, which is a statistical program. That's the one I know the best. I can understand what MATLAB is doing, but don't know how to program in it very well. I've never used Python at all, but my grad students use it a lot because you can do things with GIS with Python. So, but R is my favorite because it's free. So I encourage my students to use R or Python because they're free, and also then you can take them with you, your code with you, right? So if you do MATLAB, like you have to have a license for it and it's expensive. So
Okay. Yeah, that's the one that data scientists use, I believe, a lot, right? R. I think
what?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I was gonna say,
Yeah.
Leslie.
People use R for all sorts of purposes. Yeah, it's not just an earth science package at all. It's mainly stats.
I see. Thank you. Leslie asks, what do you wish you knew when you started your career that you know now?
I honestly wish I'd taken some of these programming languages.
Yeah.
Because it is something I had to teach myself as a postdoc. So I taught it to myself before I came, and it makes your life so much easier once you know how to do it, because it's so easy to make plots and do statistical tests that are way easier than trying to do them in Excel. Like I almost do nothing in Excel anymore because it's such a tedious program. You know, unless I need to do something really, really quickly, like that I want to make a plot for like a class that I'm teaching in like 15 minutes, then I'll do it. But everything else I do in R using a program called ggplot mostly. There's a package called ggplot that I like.
Yeah, I'm surprised there's like a lot of like there's different fields other than like computer science that use like all this programming language.
Yeah, I mean, ggplot is great because it just works for so many different things. And you know, unlike in Excel, if you like decide you want to change some minor thing, you don't have to like redo everything. You can just like change the thing in the R code and then rerun the replot the figure, right? So it's like it's so much better. So that is something I really wish I'd had as a class in undergrad, because I would have known that that was something I was interested in, and that was something that was useful.
Okay. And one more question. What would you say, like, what are some skills that really helped you like get into like the geology field? Say like I want to get into the geology field, like me starting out, what would like really help me like get into it?
Like figuring out that I'm not sure I understand, sorry.
Like say like soft skills, like usually like whenever like an employer is like interviewing somebody, they're looking for a certain set of skills, whether it be like soft skills, technical skills. Like what are some skills that you think like really help you in the geology field?
I think like most fields, having good writing and presentation skills are always, is that the kind of thing you're looking for? And I'm not sure what soft skills means.
Like communication skills, like stuff like that we don't think like that, like talking to somebody, how you
Yeah.
communicate, writing, like you had mentioned, presentation is also another thing.
Yeah, so I think also learning how, this is something I've been working with the undergrads in our class, is learning how to communicate science on a level that the general public can understand, is a really powerful skill to have, because if you're working for some government agency, you're probably going to have to talk to some other government agency that doesn't understand anything about geology. And so you have to be able to learn how to not dumb it down, but like not use jargon. Like that's the biggest thing, is to not use jargon, which like it's a conscious thing that I'm trying to do right now, is not use a bunch of geology jargon, which there's some things I've had to say, like igneous and metamorphic rocks, which not everybody will, you may not know what that means, but like
it sounds really cool though.
There's no other word for that. Okay, so those are just like the three: igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary are the three main rock types.
I remember those from like elementary.
Yeah, so usually somebody's heard of them, at least in like a high school science class or something. So but you have to make a conscious effort, especially the further you get along and you've had all this education, that you don't use terms that people aren't familiar with. So you want to try to limit as much as you can. Science communication is a really, really big skill, I think, so that you can communicate with other people about what you're doing effectively. So it's not just having good communication skills, it's also knowing how to communicate science. So we did a silly exercise not too long ago in one of my classes, where there's this book called Thing Explainer. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but it's this book where it's like a comic strip where he took like really complicated concepts like how the space shuttle works. And he explains how it works using only the 1,000 most common words in the English language. And so he has a little program on the internet that's called Thing Explainer. And you can type in words, and if they don't work, if they're not in the 1,000 most common word list, like then it kind of tells you. And so we did this exercise where I had all of the students basically come up with a little blurb about what they do, what their science is, using this, and they couldn't say anything. So like my grad student that works on water isotopes couldn't use the word isotope, so she had to explain what an isotope is using very plain language. So, you know, it's a good idea to have, you know, like an elevator pitch basically in plain language about, you know, what you do, what you're, you know, if you get to do some research, like an elevator pitch about that, in plain language about that research.
Tell them about it, but not the whole story.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
quick-
You know, if they're interested and they know what a sedimentary rock is, they'll ask you more
Yeah.
questions, right?
Definitely. I think, Robbie, you had a question?
I have a couple. Well, one of the things is I certainly understand
Come closer.
the beauty of ggplot, because I got to use a lot of that during my internship, and it just like, and I concur with what you were saying regarding how R as a scientific programming language is so versatile. For example, what I was using it for was to plot RF propagation over topographic maps, and it was using that in conjunction with that ggplot library was a great combination.
Yeah.
And so from my perspective and experience, I can definitely understand how, and with regards to sort of how a lot of the curricula is having more and more technology involved, sort of my experience kind of echoes that and agrees with that. And also it was very interesting to work with not only R, but also MATLAB, Octave, and
I don't even know what that is.
parsing like different data sets and getting clean data to work put through those data files. But Excel, just like you said, it can become a beast in its own right.
Yeah. I only use Excel to store the data, and then everything else pulls it. I pull it from R.
Exactly.
I
Excel is definitely has a really good place.
Yeah, but that's all I use it for anymore, is to store the data, and then I interpret it using R. So
And also, I guess, to continue on that conversation about R, do you find yourself still using R as much, or do you also explore some of the newer plotting options and GIS, you know, like using ArcGIS and open topography to be able to, like, you know, as part of this field, and also constantly trying to learn about the newest and latest sort of features to help us explain what we see in terms of data to anyone, you know, it's whether it's project managers so we can get something improved, or in all various areas of expertise. One of the best things about these languages is that it allows us to parse the data and parse what we see, but in a way that's easier to convey. And so do you see, does that echo in sort of your experience currently?
yeah, so the question was,
Right, the languages.
is like, are some of these other programs like ArcGIS, do I use it in my own research?
Or something that you are exploring to just stay on top of.
Yeah, or do I kind of constantly educate myself? So I personally don't, I wish I knew how to use ArcGIS. That is not one of my skills. But I encourage all of the students that I work with to take classes from people who are experts in it. And so they have been able then to use it in their own research with the skills they learn, and they teach me things. But I personally, like, I bet all I know how to do is load a map in and put some points on the map. So I can make a map, but I can't do any of the complicated statistical kind of methods. So I generally do all of that in R. And a lot of it now you can do in R, the same thing that you can do in GIS.
Open source and libraries.
Yeah.
Develop.
Yeah, so with all these, there's all these different libraries that you can use that do a lot of the same types of things. So I just haven't had to learn the ArcGIS. But it is something I am aware of as a very powerful tool. And so I have people that are experts to teach my students how to do it and encourage everybody that it's a good, we actually now have we just started an environmental science certificate that includes ArcGIS as part of that part of the curriculum. Yeah.
Robbie, let's go be geologists. Let's go be geologists, bro. Leave NASA.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of geologists in NASA. So there's lots of planetary geologists. I guess I didn't mention that.
I kind of figured that there would be like,
Yeah.
I mean, if here went out on other planets.
Yeah, so they're doing the remote sensing on other planets, right? So the moon and Mars. They're hoping to go to Venus. Venus is really difficult because it's almost 1,000 degrees C on the surface, or 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface of Venus. So it's like got a really toxic atmosphere that destroys all the equipment. So like, I think they've sent stuff there and the maximum anything lasted was an hour. So it's very, very difficult. Mars is much easier.
See, this is why I'm afraid of space, because you tell me that, I'm like, you know what? Well, let's just stay where we are currently and I'll be fine, I don't know, like the whole idea of, I understand the moon because it's, it's a rock, but then like Mars, it's like, I saw the movie The Martian. That's the only knowledge I have of Mars. But thank you for the online questions, and thank you, Robbie, for the question.
Hey, Brian. I had one more question from Leslie. She asked, if money was not an obstacle, what would you like to research or work on?
Money was not an option.
Not an obstacle. Like you didn't have to worry about
Yeah,
money.
I know what you meant. I know what you meant. I'm thinking because there's a lot of things. I'm trying to narrow it down. So I do a lot of research in Eastern Africa. So that kind of is related to human evolution and archaeology. And one of there's two different projects that I'm kind of part of that we haven't gotten funded because they're very expensive. And both of those are to get cores of sediment and rock out of Lake Tanganyika and Lake Victoria. So basically we can drill through, go through the water just like you do to get oil, like in the Gulf of Mexico, but we can collect a core of sediment. So it's like, if we bring up sections that are about 1 meter long and they're like about 5 centimeters wide. And it's basically kind of a little snapshot of the earth all the way, as far down as you have money to go. And so those projects are very expensive because we have to have basically like a drill platform like you see out in the Gulf of Mexico, because the lakes are so large, and so especially Tanganyika is very deep, and they're big enough that they have their own weather. So there's lots of waves and thunderstorms, so they have to have this big platform. And so especially the Tanganyika project involves people from around the world and people from Tanzania and Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda and Burundi. There's all these different countries involved, and we need $20 million.
Hey.
So that's just to do the one lake. So if money was not an option, so if anybody knows like
A billionaire.
Elon Musk or like any of the Google people or Jeff Bezos.
There we go. I was thinking about Bill Nye the Science Guy for some reason.
I don't think he has that much money. I mean, I don't think he's poor, but I don't think Bill Nye's a billionaire. So yeah, if money was no option, those are kind of these big projects because they would give us really long-term records of climate and environment as we've been evolving over the last like 10 million years. Especially Lake Tanganyika would give us a record for the last 10 million years. So that would be really fun project to do. So
$20 million, that's a lot of money, man. But
yeah, and that's not even like pie in the sky. That's like the low budget. So that's why it's gonna take us probably 10 years to
Yeah.
find the money. So we'll have to get the money from European science agencies as well as US and maybe Canadian science agencies as well basically cobble together enough money to do this. So
all right, this was pretty cool.
it'll happen eventually, but it's just gonna take a long time, I think.
It sucks that that's something like you want to do eagerly, but you have to wait. It's
Yeah, well, I mean, it is expensive and we have to justify it to the general public whose tax dollars are paying for it, right? So that's why. I mean, I think we definitely could do a better job funding our science in the US. Like we don't fund nearly as much as like Europe does, especially in the Germans fund a lot of science. But we could be doing a better job, but I understand especially when we're talking about millions of dollars, why they're so careful with their funds. So.
yeah, you had mentioned that you like travel to different areas. Whenever you would go to different countries, would you like cooperate with the different research like facilities that are there?
Yeah, so I've mostly worked in Kenya. I've also done some work in Tanzania and as well in Armenia, internationally. And in all of those places, we work because I do archaeology. I do work associated with archaeology and paleontology, so like studying fossils and tools, stone tools. We work very closely with the museums there. So we work very closely with the National Museum of Kenya. There's also a National Museum in Tanzania. There's another agency that also oversees research that we work very closely with in Tanzania. And then we worked closely with an archaeology department in Armenia, as well as a museum. So it's not just me going over and kind of wandering around and doing this science. Like we work with people from all over the world, and we work with people from locally from the different museums. And then we also work at the sites that we actually are digging. We also work with local people who help us do all sorts of things. And they're really the only reason that we can do any of the science. So they help us anything from getting food and water to keeping us safe and being translators. Like, you know, I speak a little bit of Swahili, but like mostly I just understand words.
Yeah.
But and a lot of Kenya doesn't even speak Swahili. So there's many different tribal languages, and so I can't learn all of them.
Yeah.
And so actually where I work the most, they speak a language called Luo, which doesn't even have a dictionary. So it would be really hard to learn.
Luo or
Luo, like Luo, Luo. So Swahili kind of got adopted during colonial times as they just chose that as the language for a lot of countries in Africa, but it is not most of them is not their native language. Like they might learn it as a second language or a third language. So most people will learn their local language, and then they learn English, and then they might learn Swahili or something else.
Would you describe that as being a challenge that you faced while having your career? And
Yes, I mean, it's very difficult working there. It is not, it's very expensive to get there. It's very challenging in terms of the field work. It's very remote. The roads can be terrible. Cars break down all the time. And yeah, I have all sorts of good stories about car issues. Most recently, when we were driving back, we stopped somewhere. And the whole way, I mean, driving probably like 3 or 4 hours, and it just smelled like a chemical.
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out what it was, and it was just an awful smell. And we finally stopped to get some food, and but then the car wouldn't stop. The car wouldn't start again. So they opened it up, and the battery was so hot that it was like burning. It was like catching on fire. So in typical, fashion, where people are just so so ingenious with things like that, we would never even consider doing this. They jump started the car, and then the car was fine once it started. Like, you just need the battery to start the car. So then we just drove the rest of the way without turning the car off, including filling it with gas.
oh my God.
So there's all sorts of crazy things like that where you're just like, sure, we'll just drive without a battery. Like, they just took it out
Oh my God.
or disconnected it. So
Hey man, sometimes it works, it works. Like the
yeah,
old
but I
saying,
would never do that here, right? Like, you would never just drive without a battery.
yeah, that's something that's something out of the ordinary. Oh
Yeah.
man, how did you overcome like certain challenges you faced? You had mentioned the language, the issue with, the battery, of course. What are things you can explain that you faced and they overcame it?
Well, I mean, it's always difficult for me in that I'm a woman, and this is a pretty male dominated field, and places that I've gone are also not super receptive necessarily to women being an authority figure. And so that's something I've had to figure out how to navigate. The field work kind of things were basically just experience, and I also had good mentors that taught me how to handle these things. And I mean, really, the thing is, you just can't panic, and you kind of just have to learn that you have to build extra time into your plan. So say you think it's going to take 5 days to do the work that you want to accomplish, like, you need to add like at least 2 days for just something to go wrong.
Yes.
Somebody's going to get sick, or car's going to break down, or we run out of water, or something's wrong with the water. Like, there's always just something. And so I had to learn to be really flexible and patient. The patience part was probably the hardest for me. And so I had to learn that you just kind of have to go with the flow, and it'll all work out, which is, especially when you're in a foreign country, that can be very scary,
Right.
because you don't know the people, you don't always know what they're saying around you. And so, but you just kind of have to go with it. But fortunately, I had very good mentors who trained me. They introduced me to a lot of good people that we work with that help solve our problems. So
You had mentioned that because you're a woman in a male dominated field, how do you face that discriminancy when you go to other countries as well, or is it just normally in the States?
it's in other countries as well. I didn't realize it until the first time I went without another male colleague. When I was a postdoc, I went for the first time by myself, and I had trouble convincing people to do the science the way I wanted them to do it. And so that was kind of eye-opening for me, that I didn't realize, like, I thought they knew that I was in charge the
Right.
previous times. But they didn't. They thought this guy that I was with in charge. So, which wasn't the case. He was just there.
Right. And did you manage to like overcome that difference and explain to them or convince them otherwise?
I just figure out ways around it. I mean, I found if you're just hard-headed enough, like, they'll give in. Being stubborn is definitely a key to a lot of determination, is key to doing geology. Because stuff's gonna go wrong, and I just kind of include that in the bin of stuff's gonna go wrong. Here when it happens, I generally try to not fight it, but like point it out more than I would over there. Over there, I'm like, I'm gonna try to change them. They have to figure this out for themselves. Here, I feel more like, when it happens, that I should try to change them.
Yeah, definitely.
It's my own culture. Like, I don't want to tell them what they should do in their culture. But here, when it's my job and my, when at home, I feel more like it's my responsibility, especially for people that come after me, that I should make it better and for them. So
definitely, it's a great, it's nice to hear that, how you defend yourself in that manner, hold your ground. That level of respect and the experience that you gained over the years, it's really interesting to hear.
yeah, I mean, and the main thing that I do is I find allies.
Right.
So especially other men that are aware of the issue and can help back me up. That's really the best thing you can do, is find allies, which can be hard to figure out. It's not usually a quick process to figure out who is ally. And also what I found is that sometimes people are an ally for one thing, but they may not be for everything. So you have to have multiple allies that you can go to for different things.
Appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry if we got too serious.
No, it's always interesting to hear everybody's experience, especially like you had mentioned, being in a male dominant career. I can only imagine the challenges you face, but
Yeah.
having to overcome it is something to be proud of, especially
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's changing. Our majors are, the majors that we have, it's pretty much 50-50 or very close, like maybe 45-55 or something like that. It's very close. It's very even. It's just still kind of in the more management kind of field, but it's very gender differentiated.
who runs what.
Yeah, so and it's not just academia, especially the petroleum industry is very much that way. So, but the people that are graduating it's pretty even now. So it's going to change. It's just going to take a little more time.
Okay. I know we had talked about COVID previously, like how, in spring semester, we were still facing that burnout. What challenges did you face during the COVID, pandemic?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of things. I had not been a professor for very long, and all of a sudden I was expected to now teach online. So I didn't even really know how to be a professor very well, and all of a sudden now I'll have this added challenge, and I was just as stressed out by the whole experience as everybody else, but you kind of have to pretend like you're not. All my students were looking to me for support, and so it's like, well, who do I look to for?
Yeah.
So that was a pretty big challenge for me, dealing, and trying to help people. I mean, everybody had so many issues with trying to complete their coursework, and so that was a big challenge, trying to figure out how to be fair and help people and be empathetic to everything everyone was going through. It really affected my research. So because I don't really do anything in kind of locally in Texas, like my other research projects are in New Mexico. So I lost 2 whole years of field work that I really needed to kind of get my research program going. One of my students had to completely redesign her project. So she was supposed to do all this work in Panama where she'd done the Peace Corps, and so she wanted to go back and do some more work there. And we couldn't do it. So we had to completely start from scratch and figure out what she was going to do. So yeah, I mean, it really affected kind of my career trajectory for a while. I had to figure out other ways to try to keep my career moving forward. One of which was that I applied for a lot of grants to try to get money to do things when we could do things again. So that was one of the things I could do, because I just had to write something from the computer. So that was one of the things I tried to do to kind of help. But yeah, it was really stressful on me as well. Just like,
And you said
Just
this
like
was your
everyone.
first time teaching?
so I had been at UH, I started in January of 2019. So I had basically been here for a year.
Mm.
And then COVID happened.
Right.
So yeah, it was very stressful because I taught my classes once and then I had to put them all online. And I was teaching classes that like you really need a rock or a microscope to look at a rock under the microscope. And so it was really difficult to try to figure out, okay, how do I teach these concepts when you can't look at the rock or the microscope?
Yeah, because the little tools, that you guys would use, it would be better to see it in person rather than
Yeah.
virtually.
Yeah, so those are kind of the things that personally in my career really affected. So I was very happy to get out this summer and do a whole lot of field work. So
What are some books you recommend to students to develop their, professional skills in geology or earth science, or if they must specialize, I know you had mentioned the 1,000 common words.
oh, that's just a website.
Yeah, it's
Um,
still something though. It's a resource.
I don't know. So I don't know that I know of any books. What this website is. I might have to look it up. There's a couple different websites that can kind of help you navigate what kind of job in earth science you're interested in, but I may have to send that to you because I can't remember the name of the websites off the top of my head. There's a couple different ones. But in terms of books, I don't know of anything that specifically.
Just the ones that are recommended from the university.
Oh, like the course books? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know of any like, how to succeed in business kind of books in geology. Never gotten that question before, so I don't have anything prepared for it. Sorry.
No, that's all good. What about organizations that students can attend?
Oh,
or
that
look
that
into?
I definitely know. So there's a lot of organizations. The Houston Geological Society is very active. So you can sign up. I think it's either free or very cheap for students, like $10 a year or something. And they have all sorts of like fun activities as well as kind of networking activities. There's Association for Women Geoscientists, AWG. Though that is a society, it's a internet, like maybe not international, maybe just national society that you can join to kind of give you a network of women that you could contact for questions. I'm a member. I'm not real active, but I'm a member. What else? Different societies like Geological Society of America or American Association of Petroleum Geology, or AGU, American Geophysical Union, that's like the biggest one. Those are all good societies to sign up for. A lot of them have their own job pages, so you can sign up. Like AGU has a really good one that you can sign up and like filter for what kind of job you're interested in. So maybe you're only looking for jobs that have bachelor's experience, then you can filter and it sends you an email every day of those types of jobs. I find that really helpful. And they also, becoming a member gives you access to all their journals and like other information. You can go, like Geological Society of America has kind of regional meetings. So the annual meeting, it varies where it is. Sometimes it can be really far away and expensive. But the regional ones, like there's a South Central section, that's the one that I'm a member of, and they usually have a meeting in either Austin or San Antonio or Dallas, a big city in Texas. So those are all really good societies. UH has, like, I don't know if UH downtown has them, but UH main campus has some like student organizations. So we have like Geo Society, and there's Wildcatters, which is like some petroleum related one. For environmental science, there's SEG, but I can't remember what that stands for off the top of my head, but that's a more environmental science kind of related society. Those all you can join and become a student member, and usually it's pretty cheap for student members for most of those. So I want to say like $25 a year or something. I don't know off the top of my head because I'm not a student, but it's much more expensive for me. But yeah, you can join those usually. And I'm not saying you need to join all of them, but maybe look at a couple and join a couple, and you could get some information from those. It would depend on your interest. So if you're interested in petroleum geology, I'd say AAPG is the best one. Whereas if you're interested in more research, GSA and AGU are the better bets. So it kind of depends on what you're interested in.
It's a lot of organizations.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I am not a member of all of those. I'm a
Okay.
member of AWG, Houston Geological, AGU, and GSA. But I think I said a lot more, but those are the only ones I'm a member of.
I'm sure you have answered this question already, but what can students research or Google to learn more about earth science or geology?
Well, that's why I wish I could remember those websites. There was a really good one. I promise I will send this to Ashley so that she can forward it to y'all that it came today. And there are some good websites about this, and another really good resource if you are interested in grad school is called the AGU Bridge Program. And this is a program that if you're interested in grad school and you're close to graduation, you apply once and it sends your application to like 100 different schools in the country that are a part of it. So you don't, if there's no fee, so like a lot of these grad school applications have like a $50 fee or something. You apply once and it sends your application kind of out to these 100 schools that are a part of this program, which you can read more about the bridge program on their website and kind of what it stands for. So that's a really good resource if you're interested in grad school. We had several students from UH get offers to go to grad school for full rides. One of them's at Cornell. I forget where the other one went. So yeah, a student that I worked with, Luis Torres, he got a job. Or he got an offer for a fully paid for master's from Cornell. So it's a really good program.
I hear big things about that university. That
Yeah.
one, Yale, and Harvard and all that.
Yeah, so yeah, it's an Ivy League school, so he got a really good offer, and all he did was apply for this, you know. He before that, he wasn't even thinking about going to grad school, and all of a sudden he had a couple offers, so.
Man, if you got a full ride, man. You better take
Yeah.
advantage of that.
Yeah. He
Oh,
was a little concerned about there not being any Mexican food in Cornell, and I was like, that is a legitimate concern, that you should have your parents ship you salsa.
of course, it's a must, you know, like,
No, because well, I'm from Texas, and when I lived in New Jersey, I would literally go to HEB and buy salsa in jars and like take it with me in my luggage, because there's no good salsa in New Jersey either.
oh, yeah. The only thing I know about New Jersey is the Sopranos. It's all it's on. Oh my.
That's, I mean, they're not all mobsters, but they all kind of have that attitude.
Yeah.
People that are from there, yeah, but they're not all mobsters, but they just all kind of have that tough attitude. They're
Yeah.
not super friendly until they get to know you a bit.
Yeah.
So
I have a coworker of mine. She's from New York, and she has that thick New Yorker accent. She's from Brooklyn, and
oh
like,
yeah, that's a very good thing.
it's funny how she mentions certain things. So I'm like, what'd you say? So when she says coffee, she says coffee, and
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Why are you adding an extra O to coffee?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's how she.
Well, I'm sure she makes fun of you for saying y'all.
I'm
You
saying
say it. I say it all the time. So
it's you have to. It's like a tradition. It doesn't sound. You all does not sound good. They're normal at least.
yeah.
My last two questions. I'm pretty sure you answered the last one, but what are some changes to common geology or earth science that students are interested in this career and that can prepare for now?
Changes, like what kind of changes?
Like,
What kind of changes do you foresee happening in geology that students should be prepared for?
Well, I already talked about machine learning, that's a big thing that a lot of people are kind of, a lot of research going into that right now. And just any kind of research with like big data, it's a big thing, I think. Again, ArcGIS is a good pathway. Any sort of research in environmental science or climate change, I think is a good bet. That's only going to get more important over the next 100 years. So that's also, you know, so you have some experience with understanding climate change. That's a good pathway.
camping.
Camping, yeah, well,
You gotta camp.
like I said, that's not a requirement. You don't have to like camping, you just have to like the earth.
And last but not least, how you decompress or take care of your mental.
Take care of my mental health. I like to go on walks with my dog. But I hang out with friends. I like going to patio bars in Houston. A big fan of the patio bar. It's patio bar season now. I like kayaking, so, or I'll go, I have a paddleboard, so I'll go up to, Lake Woodlands when it's not too windy. I mean, you could just rent kayaks up there too, but I have one that like blows up.
Mhm.
That I use, that I take my dog with me and people take pictures of it, so. I think it's funny, they don't like seem to realize that like I'm in their shot. So, anyways, what else do I do? I read a lot, so, I don't read anything.
Yeah.
No, I read enough of that at work, so I can't even read like biographies or anything nonfiction. So I read a lot of fun stuff like science fiction or just fiction in general.
Favorite book?
Favorite book, Ender's Game.
Okay.
Have you read that? It's a sci-fi book. There's a movie now. The movie's okay. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. So yeah, I read a lot of science fiction or fantasy to kind of wind down. Yeah, I can't read anything biographical. I'll listen to those on audiobooks, so.
It's always good to whenever you're reading. For me, at least whenever like I try to read, I always like transport my mind into like that universe or world or whatever. I'm just like, oh.
Yeah, so I want to escape.
Yeah.
So I'm not like escaping into like romantic, like fantasy world.
Yeah.
I like science fiction fantasy world where, interesting things are happening. So I'm reading The Peripheral right now, which is a TV show that's coming out on Amazon.
Okay.
But it's okay. It's kind of confusing. It's like more, it's more detailed than I was prepared to deal with. Like I really have to pay attention.
Yeah.
The characters are very complicated. And it's like switching back and forth between different times. So it's a little more complicated than, so it's hard to just like pick it up and put
Yeah.
it back down because I
So-
forget what's going on. But
So
Yeah.
like that Quentin Tarantino effect, it goes jumps from the middle part, the beginning, the
yeah,
end,
so it's definitely jumping around. So it's a little bit hard to follow. But so those are the main things that I kind of do to take care of my mental health. I talk to family, hang out with family. Not all of them live here, so that's a little hard, but hang out with friends.
That's cool. Well, I would appreciate you for sharing that with us. Erica, do we have anybody in the chat that had any last remaining questions?
Yes. Leslie asks if you're comfortable disclosing what has been your salary throughout your career, or what should students expect to make if they go into the field?
So it would depend on what kind of geology you're interested in. More like government jobs are like kind of like 50 to 75,000 kind of range. Petroleum geology, especially if you have a master's, those are well over $100,000 starting salaries. I want to say like 120s. I don't know, that was 5-6 years ago that's what they were offering, so I don't know what it is now, but most geology jobs you can expect to be starting with at least 50,000 and up. Especially if you have a master's, that really opens up your possibilities of starting salaries more like 75 or $100,000. So that's kind of the range. Mine falls somewhere in there. That's what I'll say. So somewhere between 50 and 120,000. So. So, we're not the highest paid, but we're pretty well paid. So, but I did have to go through 10 years of school. So I don't know that it's worth it. If that's what you're doing it for, is the money, there are other ways to get to where you want to go faster. So, I went to 4 years of undergrad, 2 years of master's, 4.5 years of PhD, and then I did 3 years of postdoc before I got my full-time tenure track professor job position, so. That's why I say it's not the direct pathway, so the direct pathway would be bachelor's, master's, that get a job in some sort of either environmental consulting or kind of industry job. Mining jobs also pay pretty well. I'm less familiar with those salaries because there's not a lot of mining that goes on in Texas, but like in places like Colorado and Montana and Wyoming, there are a lot of mining opportunities. And that's also, I guess I should have said, that's probably a big field that will be opening up because all of these, as we switch to electric cars, they need all of those elements that go in those electric cars. So things like lithium and nickel. And so we're going to need a lot of those materials and we have to find them somewhere. So mining is likely to be a field that will also open up. It's just not something I have a ton of experience with. My experience is more with kind of environmental and petroleum side of things.
Any more, Erica?
Those are all the questions I have for now.
I have one more question, but this
Okay.
is for like a personal question. So whenever you guys find like a rare earth metal, who goes and decides well, let's call it this, like
When you find a new element,
like say for example, like I don't know, you're just going digging somewhere and then you found this rock and then it's a new element or new rock type, who goes out of their way and says, this is what we're calling it, and we're gonna put it in like the periodic table or something like that.
well, I mean, we're not finding any new elements anymore unless we are putting them in like a large hadron collider and like
Right.
making them.
Yeah.
So, and they're very radioactive and they only last for like milliseconds. So we're not finding any new elements anymore. We occasionally do find new minerals, but there's like a very specific criteria for something to be a mineral. So it has to be a solid, so it can't be a liquid. It has to have a definite chemical structure that doesn't change. And there's a couple other things that have to be there, and so we occasionally do find new minerals, and it can't, we don't call it a mineral unless it's natural. So we have ton of man-made things like plastics and Teflon, I don't know, but like those are not minerals because they're not natural. So we have to find it somewhere in the natural environment for it to be called a mineral. And most of the time, if you discover it, you get to name it.
That's sick, man. That's so
It used
cool.
to be people named them after themselves. That's kind of frowned upon now. So, you name it after. A lot of times, most things in geology now get named after something that it was found nearby. So like the city it was found nearby, or the name of the creek that it was found in, or something like that. So that's generally how things are named. Is that if you find it and you can prove that it's not something that somebody already found before, then you get to name it.
I just thought y'all had like a name generator that who's
No,
Rock
most of them
generator.
are, I mean, a lot of them are named after people. And then a lot of them come from places. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time, Dr. Emily, and I thank you for all the questions you
Great.
answered and everything. And
Hope I was helpful.
for those of you who are online, just please be wary about the survey that will be sent out to you guys through your email. And if you didn't get a chance to hear any of the questions or missed out on some of the parts of the video, it will be recorded and it will be posted on Canvas groups. Whenever we get the chance, we'll notify you all. And thank you guys for joining us today. Hope you have a good one.
Thanks.
A lot of audio.